Hey friend, Chris here from Logic Pro Rules. Lately I've been getting the same question again and again when it comes to templates and recording, producing, mixing in Logic Pro. And that question is, hey Chris, how do I create a template that covers the entire production pipeline from beginning to end? The moment I have a creative idea, I can just start recording and immediately work through recording, producing, into editing, mixing, and then finally mastering in this one master template. And I get the idea, but I think this is a big mistake that many of us are trying to make, is doing everything in this one template. And I want to show you why this is a workflow killer and what to do instead. Let's dig into it. On screen, I have my mixing template, which I'm currently in the process of updating. As you can see on the left, I have a summing stack for just about every major instrument group. First are the drums with parallel effects, tracks for each drum element from the overheads, hi-hat, kick, snare, and toms. And you can see I have nested summing stacks for the snare top and bottom, and a tom summing stack for the rack and floor tom. After that is a percussion track stack, a bass guitar track stacks, keys, and both main and backing vocals. Now, the mistake that I think some users are making is they want to load every possible track that they might use into their template. They want to load every possible plugin that they might use, buses and auxes they might use for parallel effects, everything you could possibly think of for your workflow. There are three reasons I think this is a big mistake. First, processing power. If we pop open the performance meter here in the LCD, I'll double click to open it. You can always load a bigger version of the performance meter by holding Shift and double clicking. Right now, under processing threads, you can see some activity going on for my M4 Pro Mac Mini. And it makes sense, right? I have Logic Pro open, there's maybe some apps open in the background, and I have all sorts of tracks, plugins, and routing loaded in this template. It's not that big a deal. Maybe it's like 5% of processing power, maybe a little higher. Okay, so let's assume now that I'm going to record a drummer in my studio here. So I'm going to record overheads, hi-hat, kick, snare, and toms. Let me record enable the drum track stack, which will record enable all the different tracks inside the track stack. All right, so I've just enabled the overheads, hi-hat, kick, snare, and toms, including the tracks within the nested summing stacks. And perhaps you've noticed the last processing thread here is now bouncing instead of at maybe 5% or 10%, and it's now bouncing between 25 and let's say 35%. Just this one thread, right? So you can immediately see in this empty template that just that one action immediately requires more processing power. Now fast forward, we've recorded drums. We have many takes of drums. I've recorded bass, guitars, keys, vocals. I had to use flex editing, flex pitch. The point being is that by trying to conduct the entire production process in one template, right there you have to take into consideration how much processing power is available to you in a project that takes shape over days, weeks, maybe months. Okay, let me disable the drum track stack. Let's close the performance meter. And let me reveal 3 tracks that I have hidden here that are not part of my template usually. I have an instance of drummer with a SoCal kit. I have a 60s combo bass patch, which can be found in the library here. And I have a lo-fi electric piano sound that I set up. Now, I have a bass idea that I want to record that I think is pretty cool. I'm just going to start recording into my template onto this track. Of course, I want to set the buffer size low enough so I don't experience latency as I play my bass guitar through this bass patch in Logic Pro. I'll leave the I/O buffer size set to 128 samples. I think that'll be fine. I'll enable software monitoring so I can hear my bass guitar as I play through this instance of Bass Amp Designer. Here we go. Right there, I tried to record myself playing bass guitar, but there was still too much latency, even though I set the buffer size to 128 samples. I could try to set the buffer size even smaller to 64 or 32 samples, but the problem is not the buffer size. The problem are these plugins living on the stereo output. If I hover my mouse over each plugin, in the help tag that pops up, notice there's this readout of 346 samples in brackets. This is how much latency ChromaGlow is adding to the signal path as I'm trying to listen back. And this is problematic for recording. If we hover over the vintage 2BQ, the help tag says 261 samples, and the adaptive limiter says 2,400 samples. But if we bring up the sample delay plugin, and let's just link the left and right channels. If we set this to what the adaptive limiter set, 2400 samples, and go to the millisecond tab, we can see that the delay that adaptive limiter is adding is 50 milliseconds of latency. We go to ChromaGlow, 346 samples, 7.2 milliseconds. So these three plugins are adding up and creating problems for me. Even though they're not living on the bass track itself, they're still in the monitoring path, which brings up number 2. When you have your master template with everything you might possibly want to use in it, there's a good chance you're going to load plugins that add latency to the recording path. And just bypassing these plugins is not enough. Let me try to record again. I can't go any further. I just can't record in this scenario. So let's bring back ChromaGlow, the 2BQ, and the adaptive limiter. And let's try the common workaround, which is low latency monitoring. So let me play my bass guitar as it is right now. And if I now turn on low latency monitoring, you can hear a change in level has occurred because low latency monitoring is completely bypassing these three plugins living on the stereo output. And the limiter here is adding 5 decibels of gain between the gain and the output ceiling. So now I can record. It's just going to be kind of annoying because my bass guitar is going to be a lot quieter. And the same can occur for software instruments. Software instruments are a little more forgiving in terms of latency, but you add enough latency and it still can become a problem. Like if I try to lay down these keys. Right there, I tried to hit right on the bar, and you can see how late each one is relative to the bar. So that's bar 4, and that's where the chord ended up. Bar 3, chord ended up here. Bar 2 ended up here. Right, so we have to be concerned with processing power. You have to be worried about latency when you're working in a template that's so sophisticated, has so much stuff going on, which is why I think you should have separate templates for the different stages of production. One template for recording and producing, another template for mixing. Now on screen, I have a different project, which could be my recording template. I've loaded enough track types for the purpose of recording, and I'm just covering all my basic needs. So at the top, I have an instance of drummer, but I also have enough tracks to record an entire drum kit if I needed to. I have my 60s combo bass patch, my lo-fi keys, an alchemy preset, organ, 2 guitar patches, plus a track for recording vocals. If you look at the mixer, there are plenty of things going on here. However, it's not nearly to the degree of my mixing template. There's not stacks nested within stacks. There aren't plugins living on the stereo output. And if I hover my mouse over each individual plugin, notice the help tag when it pops up only tells me the name of the plugin and the preset that's being used. There's no readout for samples, seconds, or milliseconds, which is great. That means none of these plugins that are loaded are adding latency. Well, with the exception of ChromaGlow here on my electric piano, but in this case, it really won't be a problem. Now let me try recording that same exact bass part again. I'll leave the buffer size at 128, and I won't need low latency monitoring. Perfect. I got my bass recording in there. I didn't have to mess around with plugins or low latency monitoring or anything like that. Let me now go down to the keys and immediately input the performance. so much easier than dealing with plugins or routing galore and latency that you have to manage with low latency monitoring mode and having to worry about your processing power. Instead, you could have a dedicated template for recording that has just enough to get you going. When I'm recording, capturing ideas for myself and for others, the name of the game is speed and responsiveness. When I'm mixing, no one's tracking, so latency doesn't matter. My recommendation is quit fighting with your Mac. Quit trying to cram everything into a single template. Instead, use separate templates for separate parts of the production process. And I mentioned earlier in the video, there was a third reason why I like to not cram everything in one template, and that's because when you create separate templates, you create clear lines in the sand that we're done producing a recording, we're now mixing. And we're not going to sit here and produce the song for the next 6 or 12 months, right? And if you're really stuck on staying in the same project, take advantage of project alternatives, of patches, channel strip settings, presets that you can save and load with a single click. This will make your life so much easier, so much faster without having to have everything at your fingertips right now, which will cause latency, problems with processing power, the stuff we've covered. So I hope today's video was helpful for you, and I'll check you for more later. Take care.